Has anyone here ever made a mess of something quite important in your life, or a job you were asked to do? Anybody not made a mess of something? You thought you knew the best way to do it, or you just went out and you started doing it? I mean, it might just be something that you're trying to make, something with your hands, or something that you're trying to fix. Or it might be something more important that involves people and processes, maybe even money. We've all had plenty of failures in our lives, haven't we? Where we've rushed in, gone ahead and just did it the way we thought would work. Well, this chapter gives us hope, because it tells us you can actually get back on track. You can actually do things the right way and succeed. And even if you failed in something, it doesn't mean you should just give up and stop trying. This gives us hope for second, third, maybe fourth chances in some cases. It helps get us back on track, if you like. Just to review where we have been going in our journey through the book of Joshua so far, Israel has taken the land promised. They've crossed the River Jordan, and they've started now on the conquest of the land, to occupy the land. And the book of Joshua divides that conquest into three stages. There's a mission to the north, a mission to the south, the southern campaign, and the central campaign. And it's this central campaign that they did first. You can see, I'll bring it up into greater detail now, of the central campaign, where the starting point was Shittim on the other side of the Jordan River. They crossed over the Jordan, and their first conquest, first big obstacle, was to take Jericho. And they did it with the way the Lord said to do it, and they were successful. Then last week we saw in chapter 7 that they were moving on to the next obstacle, which was the town of Ai. Town of 12,000 people, we're told in chapter 8. Think maybe the size of Kaiapoi. So not insubstantial. So Joshua sent the army. Not many people will be required. 5,000 people should do it. And last week we found out that was a complete disaster. 36 people lost their life, and because one person stole from the Lord, because the Lord's covenant was with the whole nation, everybody paid the price. And so we learnt how the sin of Achan withdrew the favour of the Lord on the people, and the punishment was the due punishment on him and his family took place as the Lord commanded. Well, by this stage, Joshua would be quite chastened, wouldn't he, as the leader of the nation? And it would be tempting to give up, to say, look, I haven't got what it takes. But the Lord had said to him originally, when he called him to lead, he said, there was a particular phrase that he said 4 times. Remember what it was? Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Now, it's easy to be strong and courageous when things are going well, but it's when they're not going well that we really need to take notice of that. Be strong and courageous. And so here we are in chapter 8, verse 1. The Lord says it again. Do not fear or be dismayed. It's the same thing basically, isn't it? Do not fear or be dismayed. The Lord is saying, look, I've got this in hand. Make sure you do it my way, and here's the way to do it. You see, when you've failed to do it your way, that's when you really need to seek from the Lord his way. How am I going to do this, Lord? I shared with you, was it last week or maybe the one before, about trying to work with Soma USA, Sharing Ministries Abroad USA, who just would not work with any other country in Soma missions. And I've written to their board, tried to communicate with their chair, and then gone sideways with some other board members, and I had about 18 months of just trying to work with them, and we're getting absolutely nowhere. But the Sunday before last, as I shared with you, it was 20 minutes before we had to leave to come to church. I just felt the Lord saying, send them an email right now and tell them about the mission to the Arctic and the possibility of working with them. And it was so insistent, like it had to be done then. And I could easily have waited till after we came home from the church service. Well, it turned out that that was the precise moment that their national director was preparing for a 2-day board retreat. And the news and that opportunity, it was just the right time to get it onto their agenda for prayer and discussion, and it completely changed them. It completely reversed the course, and so now we're having a joint Soma New Zealand, Soma USA mission to the Diocese of the Arctic in May. And I wouldn't have timed it that way, but that was the Lord's timing, and He's achieved what I couldn't achieve. And so there's a couple of lessons we can learn here. First of all is that we do need to keep up our courage and our strength. Be strong and don't be afraid, or don't be dismayed when we can't see how it's going to work out. The Lord has it in hand. And so He told Joshua, I've handed over to you the king of Ai with his people, his city and his land. He's saying, I've got it in hand. I've already done it. It's already decreed. I'm doing it. It's not relying on you. And so that in itself is a relief. It's a reminder that this is God's work. We're just participating. He's got it. It's already been destined. And then the second lesson is to do exactly what the Lord says. Exactly what the Lord says, and when the Lord says, if He makes the timing a part of it. And so we have what unfolds in this chapter, a masterclass in military strategy. I would imagine in military training schools where officers learn warcraft, at some stage in history, this chapter would have been one in the curriculum. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho. In this case, you're allowed to take the spoil and the plunder and the livestock for yourself. So that's a difference. You see, that's a precise instructions. They were told not to in Jericho. This time they're told that they can. So they had to attend to these details. And I think they're allowed to do it this time because it's their physical effort is going into it, unlike the previous conquest, which was all the Lord. And so here it is. Here's the strategy. Set an ambush against the city behind it. Now, if you've watched a lot of war movies or cowboy shows or whatever, that's not unusual. But, this is maybe the earliest recorded historical instance of that as a military strategy. And so they did. They did exactly what the Lord said. So the idea is, it's a brilliant strategy. Hide a good chunk of your army behind the city, but the main body of the forces in front of the city, tempting all the people from the city to go out and fight the people in front of them. When the city has been emptied of all the fighting people, in come the hidden forces who take the city, light it on fire, and at which point they see the smoke, the forces of Ai turn back and they see, oh no! And then the main Israelite forces who have been pretending to run away from them, as they did the first time round, then they turn around and they're caught in a pincer movement. And they're completely successful. It's a brilliant, brilliant lesson. And it's because the Lord told them that's the way to do it. The Lord knew the geography, the Lord knew the mindset of the people of Ai, that they would likely want to just repeat what they found was successful the last time. The Israelites are going to run away when you put some force against them. And so the city was successful. Without going into all of the detail which you can see there, there's another great lesson. First lesson is to be courageous. Don't be afraid. The second one is to do exactly what the Lord says. Exactly what the Lord says. When we're trying to do it the Lord's way, here is the next one. Stretch out the sword, or the spear, or the javelin, all different translations in the Bibles we've got, towards Ai, for I will give it into your hands. Now, just remember who the Lord is speaking to Joshua, and what Joshua did when he was a young man. 40 years prior to that, Moses, who was the leader at the time when Israel was leaving Egypt, they come to the Red Sea waters, and the Red Sea waters need to pass. And there's a battle with the Egyptian army. What did Moses have to do at that stage? He had to raise his hands up in the air. As long as he had his hands up in prayer and in honour to the Lord, it went well for Israel. And because it took time, the arms went tired. I can't hold my arms up for very long, And so we read in Exodus, there were two men who propped up Moses' arms. One was called Caleb, who we'll hear about later on in Joshua, the book, and the other one was called Joshua. Joshua, as a young man, propped up Moses' arms. He knew that by Moses continuing to stay in prayer and intercession before the Lord, then it would go well for Israel. He recalled this lesson. The Lord was saying, just do the same. So you stretch out your sword towards Ai and just keep it up. Keep it up. That will sustain the success in the battle. The lesson it is for us is that we have to keep praying. We have to keep interceding. Yes, we're doing it the Lord's way, and we're seeing the Lord's hand at work with whatever it is that we've struggled to do, and He's now doing. Don't stop praying. Yes, you can trust the Lord to do the job, but your bit is to keep your hand up in the air. Keep the sword, the weapon in the air. Keep praying, keep interceding while it works itself out. And so Joshua did that, and that was the reason for success, the other reason for success in the battle. And that was also the sign for the troops in ambush to come out of hiding and take the city and then join in the pincer movement. And so we need to keep on interceding, keep on praying while the Lord is working things out. Don't give up at the first sign of success. Keep intervening. It's not as if we can't trust the Lord, or that we need to keep on doing it so that the Lord will answer our prayer. He is already answering our prayer. Just keep it up till the end. In the next lesson we can learn is once we have succeeded, and here Israel succeeded, the whole city was burned into a heap of ruins and the king was hanged on a tree. It was a complete victory. Then to give thanks to God for what He's done, and do it in a very formal way and a very physical way if you get the chance as well. Here, what Israel did was they built an altar on Mount Ebal, an altar to the Lord. And on the stones of that altar, I don't know how he did it, Joshua wrote the Torah, the words of the law, on those stones. That must have been quite a feat and taken quite a while. It's a very intentional thing. And on that altar, there were burnt offerings presented to thank the Lord, to acknowledge that it was his victory. So we give thanks for what God is doing, and we do it in a very open way and a very public way. And then the last thing, a very interesting thing that Joshua did, was to have the law read, the whole of the law. Here, Israel is now in the promised land. They had finally followed all the instructions and had succeeded. This was a time to remember where they had come from. This was a time to recall the big picture of what God was doing. That there was a covenant between God and Israel. And that covenant involved giving them a land. But if they were in the land, and once they were in the land, they had to maintain faithfulness to the covenant to stay in the land. There was a deal that was made, and so they were reminded about the deal. And in a very, very detailed and precise way. Now, I'm going to show you a picture in the next one here. This is where they were. That's after the battle. And there's two mountains, Mount Ebal on the left and Mount Gerizim on the right. And Israel are down in the middle with the Ark of the Covenant. The priests are gathered. Everyone is there. The altar, the sacrifices have been made to give thanks to the Lord. And now the Torah, the book of the covenant, has been read. And now the people are responding to what they have heard. Half of them are facing Mount Ebal, and half of them are facing Mount Gerizim with the Ark of the Covenant in the middle. And as Deuteronomy is being read, and Leviticus perhaps in part as well, wherever there are mentions the blessings are spoken to Mount Gerizim, and the curses are put on and spoken to Mount Ebal. Very, very physical way of remembering and being reminded of the consequences of covenant faithfulness. Now, there's a reason why they did it this way. And it's in Deuteronomy chapter 11, Moses' instructions before they crossed over the Jordan River. The whole chapter is worth a read, but I'll just read some parts of it. See, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I'm commanding you today, and the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn from the way that I'm commanding you today to follow other gods that you have not known. When the Lord your God has brought you into the land that you are entering to occupy, you shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. As you know, they're beyond the Jordan, some distance to the west, in the land of the Canaanites who live in the Arabah, opposite Gilgal, beside the oak of Moreh. When you cross the Jordan to go in to occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and when you occupy and live in it, you must diligently observe all the statutes and ordinances that I'm setting before you today. They're doing what Moses had instructed to do. And this was so that they would always know that they're only there because of God's faithfulness in the covenant. And if they responded with faithfulness to that covenant, then they would receive all the blessings But unfaithfulness, curses would come upon them. What a very graphic, dramatic way for the whole people to be reminded. So I guess for us, how do we apply that into our situation? I think it's to remember and see the big picture of what God is doing. We only stand by God's grace. We only stand by God's grace. And we have no strength in ourselves. And if we choose to reject God and try to do things in our own strength, things fall apart pretty quickly, don't they? Pretty quickly. So there we go. The great news is that there's another chance. If we're not succeeding doing it our way, how about trying the Lord's way? And that might mean taking a little bit of time to find out the Lord's way, to wait for the precise instructions, if there are precise instructions, and if there is a precise